Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Susan Valakis, and I'm the Training Development Coordinator at Now. And as such, I bring you these webinars on the third Thursday of each month. If you've missed any of them, you can find replays on our website, nowfoods.com/webinars, or on our Now YouTube channel. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please use the chat bubble on your screen, submit your question, and we will respond to you with an answer by email. I also want to remind you that since you registered for this event, you will also receive a link to an automatic replay about an hour after the presentation ends. So be sure to note that and check your inbox for that information. So with those housekeeping issues taken care of, let me tell you about today's 50-minute webinar. All I can say is that it is jaw-dropping information to learn about the unprecedented risks of GMO 2.0. The information in today's presentation comes to us firsthand from Jeffrey Smith. Jeffrey is founder and executive director of the Institute for Responsible Technology, or IRT. As a global thought leader on the health dangers of genetically modified organisms for over 27 years, Jeffrey has authored 2 bestsellers, directed 5 documentaries, delivered 2,000 lectures and interviews in 45 countries, trained 1,500 speakers, and organized more than 10,000 grassroots advocates. Jeffrey has counseled world leaders on 6 continents, and his meticulous research presented at medical conferences inspired thousands to prescribe non-GMO and organic diets. The success of the GMO education movement that he pioneered is measured in part by the 48% of world consumers who acknowledge that GMOs are unhealthy. Taking on GMO 2.0, Jeffrey and IRT are now sounding the alarm about new genetic engineering techniques, and the most urgent danger comes from genetically engineered microbes, and Jeffrey is stewarding a global effort to prevent their release. So without further ado, hold on to your seat and please join me in welcoming Jeffrey Smith for today's presentation. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Smith, founder of the Institute for Responsible Technology. And be prepared, because some of the information you're about to hear is life-changing and world-changing. What I'm going to do is to take you on a journey through GMO 1.0. Some of you have heard me. I've been doing this for 28 years, but also GMO 2.0, the new types of genetic engineering that are out there, which carry an existential threat to human health and life on Earth, which may be as dangerous as anything out there. Now, fortunately, I'm going to give some information about what we can do personally about protecting ourselves from GMO 1.0, and also what we can do collectively in terms of 2.0. Now, it may be obscure for those that don't know what a GMO is, and I'm talking about 1.0 and 2.0, but most people know GMO, genetically modified organisms, are when you're tinkering with the DNA. Normally, parents mate, have offspring, they combine the genes in an orderly or somewhat organized way, but now you can go into a laboratory and add genes from one species that's completely different, or edit and change the genes. And we're going to talk about why eating GMOs is just something you don't want to do. But then we're going to talk about the fact that you can now create GMOs in your basement, in high school science classes, and that we are now flooding the biosphere with new genetically modified organisms from all the different kingdoms, and what that can do. I'll give you a little bit of a teaser before I go into 1.0, and I'm going to also mention what you can do right up front, so you don't have to go and find it later in the webinar. Let's start with that. What you can do: eat organic. Eat organic that doesn't allow GMOs or Roundup, which is sprayed on a lot of foods right now. Eating organic for yourself. Also, go to responsibletechnology.org. You can find a database of products that have been sprayed with Roundup to see the levels of Roundup. So if you can't eat organic, at least avoid those that are GMO and those that are sprayed with a lot of Roundup. You can also please make a donation to the Institute for Responsible Technology. We really need it now, and we want to thank Now Foods also for being a regular sponsor of ours for years. I remember Elwood Richard brought me in, decades ago to speak at the headquarters, etc. And what we have for you is a program. If you're a healthcare practitioner, there's a community for you. If you're a self-care advocate, there's a community for you. Very low cost that provides us with regular income and allows us to do our work. Okay, so that's the action steps, which may not have any relevance now because you haven't gotten the information. We're going to talk about the fact that we've given the keys to the kingdoms to virtually everyone, and that now that anyone can create a GMO, we may end biological evolution as we know it. That phrase, end biological evolution as we know it, came from an indigenous wise elder in the early 90s saying, in this century, that's the threat. And when I heard that, I went, I have never heard a better phrase describing what is happening now and what could happen unless we make a change. So that's the teaser for GMO 2.0. Let's jump into why eating organic for you is so critical. I'm going to share some slides, and we're going to go through about 38 different slides in about 2 minutes, very quickly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the evidence linking correlation between the amount of GMOs in our food supply, soy and corn in particular, or the amount of Roundup sprayed on soy and corn, which means that it's genetically modified, and specific diseases. Now, why Roundup? The original GMOs were created by Monsanto because their pesticide Roundup, it's an insecticide, was going, an herbicide, it was going off of patent in 2000. And they wanted to figure out a way to maintain dominance because it was a huge billions dollar moneymaker. So they discovered this molecule called glyphosate. It was originally patented as a chelator to descale industrial boilers and pipes because it grabbed the mineral deposits and pulled them out. But when they poured it all onto the field, it killed all the plants. So they bought the molecule, the rights to it, patented it as an herbicide, put it in with other toxins into Roundup, sold the Roundup as an herbicide, and the glyphosate patent was going off patent by 2000. So glyphosate normally kills bacteria. It's an antibiotic. It's also patented as a biocide. Now, in a chemical waste dump near a factory, there was bacteria surviving in the presence of glyphosate. So it wasn't killing that bacteria, and Monsanto scientists said, great, let's put it in the food supply. So they took the gene that allowed the bacterium to survive glyphosate and put it into soybeans and corn and cotton and canola, and then later sugar beets and alfalfa, creating Roundup ready crops that you can spray with Roundup and they won't die. Just like the bacteria didn't die, now these crops that would normally die in the presence of Roundup don't die. All the weeds on the field die. So you have these clean fields making weeding so easy. Farmers took to it. But when the farmers bought the seeds, they signed a contract saying they would only buy Monsanto's glyphosate-based herbicides now that they were available from China and everywhere else. So it was a way to increase Monsanto's hold on the chemical glyphosate. So we now link both GMOs and Roundup and glyphosate to a long list of diseases. I'm going to get to that right now because this is what's really relevant for everyone, because we all know people that have these particular diseases. So you can see on the screen inflammatory bowel disease. And you can see that there's an orange line, which is the amount of glyphosate sprayed on soy and corn in the United States. In other words, the Roundup Ready soy and corn introduced in 1996. Now, this is correlation. It doesn't prove causation, but this is just one set of data. along with a lot of other things. We have animal feeding studies, we have case studies and clinical experience and self-reports and modes of action and putting animals or humans on GMOs and Roundup and taking them off and putting them on and taking them off. And these diseases and disorders are very well linked to GMOs and glyphosate, in our opinion, and we'll explain a little bit before we go on to GMO 2.0. So I'm going to just have you look at this slope here. Notice that as the amount of Roundup goes up, the amount of inflammatory bowel disease goes up. From this chart alone, we can't say if there's a causal effect, but I can tell you a dozen reasons why GMOs and Roundup are in fact linked to inflammatory bowel disease. So I'm going to fly through these charts and just show you, for example, just read the top. Like this is deaths from obesity. And this one's a little different because it has 3 lines. The glyphosate applied is in white. The percentage of genetically engineered soy and corn in the United States is in black. And they take a trend line before 1993. If nothing else changed, what would the deaths from obesity look like? And it spikes very high soon after GMOs and Roundup are introduced. Okay, are we ready? Let's go into this now. I'm just going to fly through these. You look at the slope, the parallel slope. I'll read the disease, and I'll meet you in 90 seconds. Anxiety, diabetes, deaths from Alzheimer's, deaths from Parkinson's, deaths from hypertension, autism in 6-year-olds, nearly a perfect correlation, insomnia, celiac disease, hospitalization for acute kidney injury, death from kidney failure, kidney and pelvic cancer, liver cancer, liver and bile duct cancer, thyroid cancer, deaths from leukemia, breast cancer, intestinal infection deaths, deaths from disorders of lipoprotein metabolism, peritonitis, hepatitis C, dementia, deaths from senile dementia, ADHD, schizophrenia, suicide by overdose, congenital birth defects, congenital heart defects, newborn metabolic disorders, newborn genitourinary disorders, skin disorders of all ages, plus newborn, newborns with lung conditions, newborn eye disorders, newborn blood disorders related to the immune system, anemia, lymph disorders, deaths due to stroke. I surveyed 3,256 people who reported getting better after they switched to non-GMO and largely organic diets, and here's what the results were. 85% of the people reported getting better from digestive disorders. And of the 85% of them, 80%, it was either significant improvement, nearly gone, or completely recovered. So this was dramatic. Fatigue, 60%. Overweight or obesity, 55%. Brain fog, 52%. Anxiety and depression, 52%. Food allergies or sensitivity, 50%. And you can read some of these other ones. You can, in fact, take a moment and take a look and see if you or your friends have any of these other diseases. Now, some of these are very related to the charts before. Let's take a look at insomnia. 1/3 of the people who switched to non-GMO and largely organic food showed an improvement in the ability to fall asleep. Now, what could possibly be linking GMOs or Roundup with getting to sleep? This is an example of why we think there really is causality, because we can actually connect the dots. So glyphosate blocks a pathway, a metabolic pathway in plants called the shikimate pathway. And Monsanto would brag and say, well, humans don't have a shikimate pathway, so it's safe. You can drink glyphosate, safer than salt. Don't drink it. It's actually a means for committing suicide. Please don't. But the shikimate pathway is not used by human tissue. It's used by the gut bacteria inside us. And that gut bacteria uses the shikimate pathway to produce a whole host of natural medicines inside of us that are some derived by these amino acids, tryptophan or tyrosine or phenylalanine. And tryptophan, L-tryptophan, produced by the shikimate pathway inside the gut bacteria, is then used to produce serotonin. 90% is produced in the gut, and it gets its input from this L-tryptophan and the shikimate pathway. The serotonin, happy chemical, converts to melatonin and helps us sleep. Insomnia, going down when you switch to non-GMO and organic foods, could be that you're no longer blocking the shikimate pathway of your gut bacteria. So now you're producing the L-tryptophan, producing the serotonin, which has a lot more benefits than just sleep, but it produces the melatonin, which helps you get to sleep. It also produces the tyrosine now that produces the dopamine, serotonin and dopamine, the happy neurotransmitters. So now you understand that why anxiety and depression may be related, and maybe ADHD and other things. In fact, many of these are multifactorial. When we see the research of force-feeding animals GMOs or Roundup or just the active ingredient glyphosate, they suffer from many of these diseases or their precursors. And it's remarkable how impactful GMOs and Roundup are. And it's particularly insightful when you talk to a physician or other type of healthcare practitioner who takes their patient population off of GMOs and Roundup. I was speaking at the American Academy of Environmental Medicine year after year, presenting evidence on the dangers of GMOs and Roundup. Showed up in 2009 with a video camera. And the doctors were saying, we put our patients on non-GMO and they get better. Dr. Emily Lindner said 5,000 patients she put on non-GMO and they're getting better. Virtually all of them. I said, can I come to your office? And she said, yes. And I brought the video camera and I interviewed the patients. And they were suffering from many of these different diseases. And she could even tell you how many days it would take for the anxiety and depression or the asthma or the allergies or the gut problems to get fixed. Now, she wasn't just taking people onto organic. So there was cofactors that I wasn't sure, can we isolate GMOs as the cause? At the same time, we brought the same video equipment to farmers who took pigs and cows that were eating GMOs and put them on non-GMOs. It wasn't gluten-free pigs or dairy-free cows. All they were doing is switching to the non-GMO, and they were getting better from these same types of disorders. Intractable diarrhea that was killing piglets went away. Fatigue and constant viruses and infections went away in the animals and in the humans. We've interviewed veterinarians, not just of farm animals, but pets, showing a dramatic increase in certain diseases and cancers in dogs and cats at the time when GMOs came into the food supply. And those pet owners that switched their foods to non-GMO and organic were able to resolve it. I talked to Barbara Royal, Oprah's veterinarian. She said she can resolve or manage about 90% of the patient's problems just by putting them on a healthy diet for a few weeks. They come back, most are gone completely, and the rest are just managed and they're just handled because it's actually the food. So when you look at what happens to individuals, let's go back to that screen. These are individual reports of people getting better when they switch to non-GMO and organic foods. You know, it's dramatic. We have, you know, menstrual problems and other hormonal conditions, eczema and skin conditions, infertility. What's interesting is in the film Secret Ingredients that I did with Amy Hart, we have a practitioner. There's the cover of Secret Ingredients. Go to secretingredientsfilm.com. In that film, we look at individuals who switch to organic diets, and they get better. And I was speaking at a medical conference, which I do often. In this case, it was a lot of chiropractors. And I said from the audience, from the stage, if anyone has any experience that they want to share on GMOs and Roundup, we'd like to videotape you. Someone came in and said, every single couple who comes in that's infertile, I put them on an organic diet and they end up with kids. And she's in the film, and her success rate's 100%. And there's 2 families in there with autistic boys, no longer on the spectrum after they switched to organic. One family had 21 chronic conditions. Between the 5 of them, all went away. And the scientists explain why, and the doctors say these are actually typical responses in our patient populations. These are not one-offs. So if you're a healthy eater and you're not able to get your spouse or your kids or your parents or your best friends to switch to healthy organic eating, don't bother trying. Let me do the work. Show them the movie Secret Ingredients, and you'll find that it works. So far, we think it works better than anything else we've seen. All right, that's GMO 1.0. I usually give talks that include stories of cover-up and Monsanto's hiding the evidence and causing scientists to be fired and stripped of responsibilities and forced out, and how the FDA scientists were all concerned about GMOs, but the person in charge of policy at the FDA was Monsanto's former attorney, later Monsanto's vice president. He ignored the scientists, denied their concerns, and allowed GMOs on the market without any safety testing or labeling. We're not going to go into that. We're going to go into 2.0. 2.0 is the new types of genetically engineered technology. The most prominent of the new technologies is called gene editing, and the most prominent of those is called CRISPR. You probably have heard of CRISPR. CRISPR, normally with GMO 1.0, you'd, let's say, load a gene gun with millions of particles of gold or tungsten coated with gene constructs and shoot them into a plate of cells, hoping that some of them get into the DNA, or you use bacteria to infect the cell. You don't know exactly where it goes, but it causes massive collateral damage in the DNA, massive collateral damage. And in the new gene editing like CRISPR, you have a molecule that's a scissors, molecular scissors, and another part that is like a little script that says, okay, cut here, cut here. It's looking for the code along the DNA. And it therefore does something. It'll disable a gene, or it'll cause it to rebuild when it repairs itself with a new additional sequence. And these CRISPR, they claim, is more precise than shooting with a gene gun. And in that sense, it is. But it also causes massive collateral damage in the DNA. In fact, on our website at responsibletechnology.org, we have a 6-minute film called 7 Reasons Why Gene Editing is Dangerous and Unpredictable. It's a animated journey into the DNA where you can actually see what happens, how it can cut in the wrong place, how it can create effects that can be inherited for at least 10 generations, can cause shattering of the chromosome. In fact, the journal Nature described the effects of CRISPR as chromosomal mayhem. So go to responsibletechnology.org and watch that 6-minute film, 7 Reasons Why Gene Editing is Dangerous and Unpredictable. Now, what's interesting and relevant is that if you use CRISPR to make new GMOs for the food supply, as the French Agency on Human Health and the Environment just confirmed, it can cause new allergens or new toxins or nutritional problems because of this tendency for side effects. And the scientists know that, but Monsanto, as you know, now purchased by Bayer, has a history of lying about the safety of their earlier GMOs, and they're very successful at convincing decision makers oftentimes people that have come from their payroll into positions of power, that they can look the other way. So in the United States, we don't have any requirements for testing the safety of gene edited foods before they go in the food supply in almost all cases. Same with Canada, the UK, Japan, Australia, India, Brazil, Argentina. They're trying to convince the EU. Very, very dangerous. Things that can possibly cause cancer or allergens or create toxic reactions. And the problem is that gene editing is so cheap, you can buy a CRISPR lab for less than $2,000. It's being used by students in high school biology classes. I can imagine already there's probably been some CRISPR-derived food served at science fairs. There's companies that are doing CRISPR gene editing of foods and putting it on the market, not telling anyone. Doesn't require testing or labeling. It can flood the food supply. So all the work that we've done in containing the number of GMOs for all these years, and we've been very successful at the Institute for Responsible Technology. Half the world's population now understands that GMO foods are unsafe. We had a great deal to do with that, pioneering that messaging. All of that progress could be reversed by giving the ability for virtually anyone to create a GMO and put it on the marketplace without any required safety testing. That's the food supply. Organic doesn't allow that. Non-GMO project doesn't allow that. So be careful about what you choose going forward. We know that there was mustard greens out there being used by food services that were gene edited. The number hasn't really expanded yet, but we can't really track it because they don't have to tell anyone. What about non-food? There's a gene rush going on where companies and entrepreneurs and startups want to get their patented organism out there and make money before their patent expires. So they've got genetically engineered insects and grass and trees and pets, anything with DNA. Here's where we've given the keys to the kingdoms to anyone. You can buy a biohacker CRISPR kit and use it in your basement, create new GMOs every day. Here's where we are looking at the potential to end biological evolution as we know it, incrementally by releasing these genetically modified organisms where you can't recall them, where they're prone to side effects. You can't predict their interactions. They're new organisms, not part of the billions of years of evolution, so we're replacing nature. Very, very serious. This is the first time that humanity has had this technology so widely available, and unless we rein it in, all future generations will be inheriting a different type of nature, combination of real nature and laboratory creations prone to side effects that in some cases you don't even know are that way. And some people can then gene edit that and then gene edit that. You may have multiple generations within a single species. And who's to say what we can do at that point? Because you can't recall these from the environment. So the Institute for Responsible Technology and many other groups around the world are trying to rein in and create responsible regulations. Our angle, we've decided to focus on the most dangerous GMOs to start. Can you guess? Some people guess humans. Some people guess mosquitoes. My answer, microbes, microorganisms. You probably have some idea about the term microbiome. Let me just blow your mind a little. We not only co-evolved with the microbes living inside us, we can get by with a measly 23,000 genes in our cells because we use the genetic information of the 3.5 million genes in the microbiome of all the critters living inside us. We work with them and have outsourced up to 90% of our chemical and metabolic functions to the microorganisms. They work on our behalf silently. If someone has a breast tumor, certain type of bacteria comes and protects. If Alzheimer's, a certain type of fungus comes and protects. In the second trimester, milk digesting bacteria go into the birth canal to inoculate the baby to provide them with the ways to digest the milk. More microbes come from the blood, the milk, from the nipple, from the skin. The first comes in, and the first microbes come and take the oxygen out of the lower intestine to create an anaerobic environment, which gives rise to a perfect space for the bifidobacteria, which helps the child. A lot of the milk is indigestible by the infant. It's not designed for the infant. Somehow in nature's wisdom, the milk feeds the microbiome. Why? Because when the microbiome is well established in the infant, it sets up a lifelong platform for better health. If the infant gets sick, the microbes in the saliva feed back through the nipple and change the formula in the milk. I'll say that again. If there's a fever or a sickness in the infant, the milk changes. How does the body of the mother know? The mom doesn't know. The microbes pass it on. This micro Jedi army, which works on behalf of us, has been doing it for millennia, and it works also in the soil. It creates nutrients that are assimilable by the plants. It pulls the carbon out of the atmosphere, creating this whole carbon cycle. The algae produce most of the Earth's oxygen. The mycorrhizal fungi shuttle nutrients between trees. These kingdoms are critical to life. And the reason why they're so adaptable is because they do these swarming of genes and genetic information, swap meets, where they exchange genes to see how it can benefit the microbes and the community of microbes called the microbiome to support the environment, the ecosystem that they're in, or the host that they're living in, and be supported by them. So it is this beautiful, intricate balance. There's about 1 trillion microbes. We've only identified maybe 1%. And now we are introducing genetically engineered microbes into the biosphere that could forever damage it. What happens when we have an altered microbiome? My friend Karen Krishnan said up to 80% of human diseases find their source in an altered human microbiome. There's a programming in there that's simply stunning, and we don't understand it yet. The soil may lose its ability to draw down carbon. Algae may lose its ability to give us the oxygen to breathe. We may destroy forests because of the mycorrhizal fungi. All of that is at risk. You release a genetically engineered microbe. It did not co-evolve with us. It's got new information in there, new ways of acting. And now if it survives, it can replicate massive numbers, travel, mutate, swap genes with others. Now it's sending around that information into microbial communities, being picked up by hundreds or thousands of different types of microbes that then spread it to others and to others and to others. So we have a situation now where we are flooding the microbiome of the planet, and it's getting worse. Here are the sources. There's 2 companies, Pivot Bio and BASF, that have genetically engineered microbes that are spread on as many as 45 million acres already. 45 million acres. And we don't know what'll happen when that transfers into gut bacteria. Sometimes when you create microbes to release in the soil, you want to make them survive, so you create antimicrobials that it kills off other microbes, or antibiotic resistance so it stays alive. If those transfer to gut bacteria and hook up with a pathogen, now the pathogen has a way to kill off other microbes and to not die with antibiotics. And so you may completely change the balance. Doesn't matter what particular trait you've put into the soil bacteria, because you've also, in terms of whether it's nitrogen fixation or whatever, because just the mechanism that you've created to keep it alive and to win out over the competition could destroy human health. And you can't tell where it's going to go. You can drop some microbes in soil in Arkansas and it'll end up in the gut of an infant in Siberia. So spreading them out in the environment, ridiculous prospect. Then there's the high school and the college, the academic use of CRISPR and gene editing. We'll pump out the greatest variety of genetically engineered microorganisms. Because, you know, when you're doing CRISPR, you can pick any microbe. You can pick a microbe from the stream or the lawn or your skin. You can buy the 10,000 on one website. And then you choose where to cut. You can buy 120,000 targeted sequences online or design your own. It's a genetic roulette, putting out massive combinations. Horrible for what it might do. Most are probably going to die if they get released, but certainly not all of them. Now, what could happen? Well, if you go to our site, responsibletechnology.org, you'll see a 16-minute film called Don't Let the Gene Out of the Bottle. And that talks about the dangers of genetically engineered microorganisms. And it gives two examples. I won't spoil the plot for you, but one, had it been released as planned, could have theoretically ended terrestrial plant life. Another, had it been released as planned, could have theoretically altered weather patterns. Don't let the gene out of the bottle, responsibletechnology.org. 16 minutes. Now, the problems of ending terrestrial plant life and changing weather patterns could have happened just if that particular microorganism operated as it was designed to do, but in more ecosystems than were planned. It doesn't count the fact that it might swap those genes with other microbes or mutate, or the side effects of the genetic engineering process, which could mean that the genetic engineering process could be doing things that you never intended it to do. So what do we do about this? Well, let me just tell you, there's a couple of other sources of genetically engineered microbes that are out there potentially. Some companies are actually genetically engineering probiotics or medicines that are targeting particular diseases. That's potential catastrophe. And then there's something called synthetic biology. And you genetically engineer yeast or bacteria. So let's say you want to produce an opioid. You could take a gene from the opium plant and put it in yeast, and it'll produce that targeted opioid or CBD or saffron flavoring, you know, or vanilla. So you turn these little microorganisms into factories, and then supposedly you purify out the final result and you feed it to people, or you use it as an industrial enzyme. But you're creating these vast vats of these bacteria or yeast, and you're talking about factories that you can't rely on them for complete destruction of their genetically engineered microorganisms. So they may get deposited in the environment or picked up in human gut, which means our gut bacteria might be producing opioids or CBD or whatever. Very dangerous. And when they purify it before they feed it to us in some format or another, if there's any DNA in there that coded for that particular product, that naked DNA could potentially be picked up by gut bacteria. That's one way that it swaps genes, just naked DNA lying around. So it's the number of companies that are doing this synthetic biology is in the hundreds. The non-GMO project is tracking over 500 to protect our food supply so that they can identify which ones they won't put their butterfly seal on. I know Now Foods does not use synthetic biology and have been testing, looking at possible ways of finding those companies that are using it, which I think we agree it's very dangerous. So what do? For 28 years I've been doing the GMO work, And the first strategy was, let's tell everyone about it, tell the dangers, tell the cover-ups, so that people are armed with the ability to choose healthier food. We get a certain percentage of the population to avoid GMOs. It's a tipping point. Companies don't want to use GMOs to protect their market share. That's how we have protected the food supply, keeping the number of GMOs to about a dozen. But now with GMO 2.0, everything's on the table. It's too easy. It's too unregulated, unlabeled. So we need laws and treaties. It's not good enough if the United States has a Microbe Protection Act. It wouldn't have worked during COVID. You know, microbes travel and mutate and infect everything. So we need actually to create international treaties to protect the global microbiome, to protect all living beings and all future generations, and not just on microorganisms, but also the genetic integrity of life on Earth. The Institute for Responsible Technology is taking the lead on the microorganism piece because we think that's the most urgent, most existential threat, and the easiest, most likely to get international treaties and national laws. There's been less investment in it than the millions and millions of acres in the plant and on the animal side too. So it's early enough so I think we can lock it down. We don't have the money to do it. So that's why I encourage everyone to go to responsibletechnology.org and make a donation. And for recurring donations, now we can count on that money coming in and hire and create things on that basis. In fact, if you donate as little as $25 a month, then we have a whole self-care advocacy program where we've curated the best information from our 20 years. And if you're a healthcare practitioner, go to the healthcare practitioner community there, because there's a whole bunch there for you. So that's the appeal. That's the call to action. Eat organic, go to the website responsibletechnology.org, make a donation, and try and get on those communities so that you can get the module of learning on GMO 1.0, 2.0, watch the film Secret Ingredients that's there right now, and take advantage of the materials there for you or for practitioners, for your patients and clients. Now, the good news is, and we'll end with good news, we have been successful, you know, in the first part, talking about the health dangers. When I started learning about this in 1996, no one was talking about the health dangers. And they continued to not talk about the health dangers. All the NGOs wanted to talk about the environment and patenting and farmers' rights to save seeds, and no one wanted to touch health dangers. And I'm like, guys, this is the Achilles heel. Getting consumers to not eat it is the way to stop it, since they have the government in their pocket, the academia in their pocket, the farmers in their pocket, they have the media in their pocket, but they don't have consumers. So we guessed right, and that was, we were able to turn around. So I traveled to 43 countries and spoke, and we trained 1,500 speakers on GMOs, organized over 10,000 activists. I have 5 films and 2 books. And it took 25 years. We don't have that time now. And now we're not just convincing consumers, we need new laws and treaties. So that's way more expensive. The good news is it's easy to convey the dangers. You have it. Just watch the 60-minute film. Don't let the genie out of the bottle. It's like the eye, you know, hair goes straight up. And it's time now. We just had the pandemic, so people are very sensitive to microbial issues. There's a whole group of people wanting to stop gain of function enhancement of potentially pandemic pathogens in laboratories. They've got it partially right, but they don't realize that genetically engineering even common, supposedly harmless microbes that are on the skin and the gut and the soil can do even worse, because those are the workhorses that we need to be functioning properly. And if we change the way they're functioning, it could take us out. So we're hoping that the information gets spread from person to person. Please share this webinar or this presentation. Please sign up for our newsletters, share that information. And we know that when a certain number of people in civilization align on something, that can have a kind of a quantum leap. Consciousness is neither local nor linear. There is a field effect that's well established. I'm not going to get into that now. It's not the purpose of this webinar, but we know that human consciousness can leap, and in this case, it has to. now that a single high school student has the ability to do untold damage to all living beings and all future generations. Humanity has to redefine its responsibility in relation to nature as its protector, as its safeguard, now that we have the ability to so easily and accidentally destroy it. So this change in relationship with nature, it's the need of the time, it's the demand of the technology, and in itself is a solution to many other problems. And so I invite you to take this new mindset, not as a victim, but as a victor. Not on my watch, not in this generation. Align yourself with that new style of thinking, and that we are going to actually pass the laws and the treaties and operate in ways that we know are safe for nature and future generations. And then let's multiply ourselves so that we have that shift in consciousness and protect all living beings and all future generations. Thank you all very much.
Wow. Wow. You said you were going to blow our minds, and you absolutely did that. This is amazing information. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Wow, I'm right there with you to get this information out, to support this cause. I know as you and I were talking before we went live, I started with Mr. Richard, Elwood Richard, the founder of Now Foods. 25 years ago, I started as his assistant. I knew nothing. I didn't even know what GMO meant, but he was already on the bandwagon at that time, and very, very supportive of, fighting against it. So, wow, I don't even know what to say because I'm just like blown away. So just excellent, excellent information. Thank you again.
And I want to thank Now Foods. I'm about to go to the Expo, Natural Foods Expo. My first time I went there was in 2003. And I met an activist named Craig Winters, who has a citizens campaign to label genetically engineered foods. And he had a big banner. And on the banner for his campaign was Now Foods logo. And he told me, oh, Elwood, he's just the guy. You got to talk to him. And anyway, I ended up using them as my fiscal sponsor in the beginning before we had our own nonprofit, meaning Craig Winters organization. And did meet Elwood and did meet the family and gave presentations at like a public presentation in, I think, the lobby of your main headquarters. And then I've interviewed Jim Emmy, your current CEO, who I love, and he's just an amazing man. And did interviews with some of your scientists recently, and we posted those on social media. Your commitment to non-GMO, and I have to say, I want to share this with everyone. Or I always share this with everyone that not every product that's available on the supplement world is available as a non-GMO.
Right.
And you go out there and say, yeah, this is genetically engineered, or genetically derived from synthetic biology or whatever, but there's no other alternative, and we're making it available because of high standards, et cetera, but we're letting you know, and if it had an alternative that was non-GMO, we would offer that instead. There's very few like that, but you are so above board with that. It's just great.
Yeah. Yep. We always, like I said, we always have been. I remember it from the beginning, and you mentioned the name Craig Winters. That comes back to my mind. I remember that name, and
I interviewed Neil Levin too, one of your main people. I spent an hour and a half talking to him, but years ago at your headquarters or at one of your factories, I don't remember where, in Chicago area, and going into all the reasons why. And then I interviewed Jim from the floor of Expo, and he's so dedicated to pure food, and how many times you test your products each month, and I don't know.
Yeah,
90,
that is the thread of who we are, and it has been from as long as I've been there. That was always quality above all else. So, wow, thank you so much again, Jeffrey. I really appreciate the information, and I just encourage all of our listeners to just share this. You will be getting a copy of the replay of this webinar about an hour after we end. So feel free to share away. And again, you can go to
Responsible Technology.
responsibletechnology.org. Yes.
Right.
Check out all the fabulous information and support this organization. So
yeah, and thank you now for continuing to support us year after year.
I'm sure we will continue. So, all right. Thank you again. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Bye-bye now.
Safe eating.